You won't believe it when two American political icons prepare to face off on one stage. On one side stands J.D. Vance, the vice president warrior from Ohio and the pioneering flame of MAGA. On the other, Barack Obama, the former president returning, to defend his legacy against the fierce onslaught of the new movement. J.D. Vance isn't just fighting for politics. He carries the anger of the working class, those who feel abandoned during Obama's tenure, and attacks Obama's policies, from Obamacare to trade deals, accusing him of representing the elite who harmed the American people. Every word from Vance feels like a lethal blow to Obama's legacy. Obama, though a master orator, faces undeniable accusations and sharp arguments from his younger opponent. This debate isn't just a political exchange, it's a fight to the death, and when Vance finishes, the tension is almost explosive. Obama isn't just pushed onto the defensive, he's battling to preserve everything he once stood for. But he also suffers public humiliation as Vance succeeds in dismantling everything he stands for. Tonight, the MAGA empire has risen, and Obama's legacy is fading into the past. Before diving into the story, comment where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the latest updates. The Fox News studio blazes like a furnace, the air thick with heat, and the ferocious roars of the MAGA crowd. Red hats flood the stands, forming a sea of people shaking the arena from the very first seconds. The stage is like a meticulously crafted battlefield, blinding lights, pounding sound, and cameras panning relentlessly to capture every breathtaking moment. At the eye of the storm, Sean Hannity, the veteran host, steps out with a sharp smile, his voice booming through the mic. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the decisive debate. Tonight, you will witness a historic showdown. Two generations, two visions, and only one America. He turns to the audience, hand raised amid thunderous applause. To my right, please welcome Vice President J.D. Vance, the warrior of the MAGA movement, the uncompromising voice of America's working class. The stands erupt with chants of Vance, Vance, while opposite him stands former President Barack Obama, ready to defend the views, ideals, and legacy he led for 8 years in the White House. J.D. Vance stands behind his podium, eyes cold as ice, shoulders slightly forward like a boxer awaiting the bell, his gaze sharp and unyielding, prepared to dismantle every piece of Obama's legacy. Across from him, Barack Obama steps up with a calm demeanor, but the tension in his eyes and his firm grip on the podium betray his true emotions. Without delay, Hannity launches the first question, like tossing a grenade into the battlefield. Vice President Vance, how do you assess Mr. Obama's immigration policy? Did they truly protect the American people? The air tightens, the spotlight fixed on Vance. He responds instantly, his voice booming through the studio. Mr. Hannity, Barack Obama's immigration policy is a stain on American history. It didn't just fail, it was a sellout of the people's security. For 8 years, Obama flung open the border gates, letting predators like MS-13 flood in, sowing blood and chaos in American communities, and tears across American soil. I grew up in Middletown, Ohio, watching peaceful neighborhoods turn into battlegrounds because of criminals Obama refused to deport. That wasn't policy, it was blatant betrayal. The stands erupt, applause crashing like a tidal wave. Vance raises a hand, quelling the frenzy, then continues, his voice now heavy with sorrow. Listen to the story of Maria Alvarez, a single mother in Columbus, Ohio. She worked grueling 12-hour days to raise her 3 kids. One night, her son, Tommy, just 16, was stabbed to death by an MS-13 member right on their front porch. The killer was an illegal immigrant, previously arrested for violence but released under Obama's watch. Maria now only holds Tommy's framed photo, weeping in despair. Obama? Is that what you call compassion? The audience falls silent, some choking back tears. Obama speaks, his voice lowering. My policies prioritized humanity, focusing on family reunification and opportunities for immigrants. Mass deportation isn't the solution. Comprehensive reform is. But Vance cuts him off, his voice slicing like a blade. Humanity for who? Whom, Mr. Obama? For Maria, who lost her son, or for the one holding the knife? Under you, criminal deportations dropped 40% compared to President Bush. In 2008, America deported 400,000 criminals. By 2016, that number fell to just 240,000. MS-13 spread to 40 states from coast to coast, killing hundreds of innocents. You call that reform? I call it the blood of Americans spilled because of your weakness. The crowd roars, chants of, "Vance, Vance," drowning the studio. Obama tries to counter, his voice rising with a hint of anger. Those numbers don't tell the full truth. We targeted dangerous criminals, not innocent workers. Border security needs balance with compassion. But Vance gives him no breathing room. Stepping forward and pointing at the audience, his voice a resounding accusation. Balance? You had 8 years to balance, and what you left were shattered communities. In Ohio, we don't need fancy words. We need safe neighborhoods where kids can play outside without fear of being shot. Under you, MS-13 turned towns into hellscapes, trafficking drugs, hacking off victims' hands, and leaving families broken. I've walked those streets. I've held the hands of mothers who lost their kids, and I swear they won't be forgotten. Vance pulls a photo from his pocket, holding it high for the cameras to catch. This is Tommy Alvarez, Maria's son. He wanted to be an engineer, but that dream was snuffed out by someone you refused to deport. Obama, look into Tommy's eyes and tell me you did the right thing. The audience goes quiet, then applause surges like a storm. Obama lowers his head, lips pressed tight, silent. Hannity jumps in, his voice brimming with excitement. Vice President, you say you and Trump are changing this? How? Vance turns back, eyes blazing with pride. Since taking office, President Trump and I have arrested 1,000 MS-13 members, added 10,000 Border Patrol agents, and built 200 more miles of wall. We don't just talk, we act. Last year, criminal deportations rose 50% compared to Biden's time. The result? Safer neighborhoods where families like Maria's can sleep without fear. Obama tries to counter, his voice tinged with desperation. A wall doesn't address the root. Cause. We need to work with Central America, invest to reduce migration at its source. Vance smirks, his smile cold as ice. Work together? You tried, and MS-13 grew stronger than ever. While you sent money to Honduras, we sent criminals back where they belong. Americans don't need excuses. They need action. Foreign aid? They need to know their kids are safe walking the streets, Vance declares as the crowd leaps to its feet, cheers thundering through the studio. His voice sharpens, cutting through the noise like a verdict. Obama, your policies were a ticket for criminals. You chose to protect those who destroy the country over those who build it. I stand here for millions of American workers who paid the price for your failures. We don't forgive and we don't forget. Obama tries to respond, but his voice is drowned out by the boos. I did what was best for the country, balancing security and compassion, he says. But Vance just shakes his head, his voice low but sharp as a knife. Best? Tell that to Maria. Tell that to the thousands of families who lost, loved ones to those you set free. Your best was a disaster, and America chose us to fix it. Hannity raises a hand, shifting topics with eyes gleaming with delight. An explosive start, Vice President. The crowd still roars while Obama stands silent, his gaze heavy. The atmosphere now feels like a Roman Colosseum, with J.D. Vance dominating. Like an unbeaten gladiator after landing a devastating blow on Barack Obama's immigration policies, the MAGA crowd restless and chanting his name. Vance! Vance! The chants barely fade as Sean Hannity, with a victorious grin, fires the next question like a sharp arrow. Vice President Vance, Obama touts his economic recovery. What do you think of his economic legacy? Vance smiles, a hunter's smile, sharp and unyielding. His voice rings out, commanding. Barack Obama's so-called economic recovery was a grand deception. For 8 years, he pushed America's working class into the shadows, letting factories close, towns crumble, and the American dream turn into a nightmare. I grew up in Ohio, where workers like my family were crushed by Obama's policies. This wasn't recovery, it was systematic destruction. The crowd erupts, applause rolling like thunder. Vance holds up a chart, the stage lights illuminating the cold numbers. Look at the facts, he continues. Under Obama, America lost 5 million manufacturing jobs. Average GDP growth was just 2%, the slowest since the Great Depression. The national debt doubled from 10 trillion to 20 trillion. While Obama celebrated recoveries in Washington, towns like Youngstown, Ohio, were left with rusted factories and desperate families. The audience shudders as Vance's voice deepens with emotion. Let me tell you about Joe Carter, a steel worker from Cran, Ohio. He worked 30 years at a factory, raising 2 kids and dreaming of sending them to college. In 2015, that factory closed, crushed by cheap imports from overseas. China, enabled by Obama's trade deals like TPP, took everything from Joe. He lost his job, his home, and eventually his hope. Today, Joe works part-time as a security guard. His wage is barely covering groceries. Obama, you call that recovery? Vance's voice cuts through the air. Obama responds, his voice straining for confidence. My administration inherited the worst financial crisis since the 1930s. We created 15 million jobs, cut unemployment from 10% to 4.7%. That's real progress, not Vance's sad story. But Vance isn't letting him off the hook. He leans forward, his voice a storm sweeping away every excuse. Progress? Obama, who did you create jobs for? Low-wage, part-time gigs in big cities, or for the elites on Wall Street? While Joe Carter lost everything, the banks you bailed out with $700 billion were handing million-dollar bonuses to executives. You signed TPP, paving the way for China to steal our jobs. From 2009 to 2016, China's exports to America surged 30%, destroying Ohio's steel and auto industries. You call that progress? I call it selling out American workers. The crowd roars, jeers aimed at Obama. He tries to push back, his voice rising with desperation. We brought the economy back from the brink. Trade deals like TPP were meant to strengthen America's global standing, not hurt workers. Vance laughs, a chilling sound that echoes through the studio. Global standing, Obama? American workers don't need global standing. They need jobs to feed their kids, factories to work in, dreams to chase. You had 8 years to protect them, but you chose. China, Wall Street, the elites, while you dined with billionaires, Joe Carter sold his car to buy milk for his kids. That's your economic legacy? A forgotten America. Vance holds up another photo, this time of an abandoned Ohio factory, its brick walls crumbling under a sunset. This is Joe's factory now, just a pile of scrap. Under you, 50,000 factories like this closed across America. I've walked through those towns, seen unemployed fathers lining up for benefits, mothers crying because they couldn't afford Christmas gifts. Have you ever stepped into those places, Obama, or did you just read reports from the White House? The audience leaps to its feet, applause crashing like waves. Obama lowers his head, searching for words. We invested in clean energy, education, and healthcare to build a foundation for the future. Not everything was perfect, but we made progress. Vance shakes his head, his voice now a judgment. Progress? Tell that to the 5 million workers who lost jobs. Tell that to towns turned into industrial graveyards. You invested in green energy, but who paid the price? Workers like Joe who didn't need solar panels. They needed stable jobs. You failed them, and they chose Trump to fix your mistakes. Hannity cuts in, but many say he divided America. What do you think? Hannity asks. Vance tilts his head, a subtle smile flickering like an archer locking onto a target. His voice rings out, low but razor-sharp. Mr. Hannity, Barack Obama promised unity but sowed division. For 8 years he turned, Americans against each other, pushing us to the edge over race, class, and belief. I grew up in Ohio, where workers, white, black, or Latino, shared one dream: work hard, raise a family, build a future. But Obama, with his lofty speeches, turned that dream into a cultural battlefield. The stands explode, applause pounding, like rain. Vance raises a hand, his gaze sweeping the audience, his voice now tinged with outrage. Let me tell you about Sarah Thompson, a teacher in Dayton, Ohio. She taught for 20 years, loving every student regardless of race. In 2014, when Obama went on TV talking about white privilege after Ferguson, Sarah's students grilled her. Do you have privilege? Sarah, who grew up poor and worked 3 jobs to raise her kids, felt slapped in the face. Obama, you turned people like Sarah into enemies just because of their skin color. Is that unity? The audience bristles, boos aimed at Obama. He responds, his voice straining for calm but betraying defensiveness. I work to build bridges between communities, encouraging honest dialogue about race. My speech was aimed to heal, not divide. But Vance gives him no quarter. He steps closer to the podium, his voice a whirlwind, tearing through every excuse. Honest dialogue, Obama? You didn't dialogue, you lectured, you stood on your pedestal. Telling workers like Sarah they were the problem, that they were privileged despite having nothing but sweat and debt. While you talked of healing, riots in Ferguson and Baltimore spread, tearing communities apart. You poured fuel on the fire, turning Americans into warring factions. That's not unity. It's cultural manipulation. The crowd roars, their shouts drowning out the studio. Obama tries to counter, his voice rising with a hint of anger. We had to confront America's history of injustice. I pushed for justice, not division. The riots were a consequence of inequality, not my words. Vance shakes his head, a contemptuous smile flickering. Justice, Obama? Justice isn't turning white people into villains or black people into perpetual victims. Justice is treating everyone fairly, regardless of race. But you chose division. In 2015, you backed the Justice Department to vilify police, while communities in Chicago and Baltimore drowned in violence. Under you, violent crime in cities rose 20%. You call that justice? I call it the collapse of order. Vance holds up a sign showing a ravaged Dayton neighborhood with burned-out stores after the riots. This is Dayton, Ohio, after your calls for justice. People like Sarah lost jobs because schools closed, family businesses were torched. I've walked those streets, heard residents beg for peace. Have you ever been there, Obama, or do you just give speeches at Harvard? Obama responds, his voice trembling slightly. I visited those communities, listened to them. We invested billions in education and jobs to reduce inequality. Unity takes time and honesty. Vance cuts him off, his voice swift and sharp like a blade. Time? You had 8 years and left America more fractured than ever. You invested billions, but who benefited? Elites in big cities, not people like Sarah in Dayton. You talk of honesty, but you boxed Americans into labels. Privileged, oppressed, instead of letting them be themselves. You turned American culture into an endless war. Hannity jumps in, his voice brimming with excitement. Vice President, you say you and Trump are uniting America. How? Vance turns to the audience, his eyes radiant with belief. President Trump and I don't see Americans through the lens of race or... We believe in one value: work hard, and you'll succeed. We created 500,000 manufacturing jobs, cut taxes for the middle class, and built an America where everyone has a chance. That's real unity, not Obama's divisive speeches. Obama tries to interject. Unity can't ignore historical injustice. We need dialogue to move forward. Vance fires back, his voice a declaration of war. Dialogue. You turned dialogue into a monologue, forcing Americans to kneel and apologize for things they didn't do. Trump and I unite Americans through action, jobs, security, pride. You divided us. We're healing. The crowd erupts, cheers crashing like ocean waves. Barack Obama is no longer the confident statesman who stepped onto the stage. He's like a veteran boxer pinned against the ropes. The smile he forces can't hide the tension, and his eyes, once blazing with assurance, now dim under the pressure and relentless, unspoken blows. In the midst of the audience's frenzy, Sean Hannity seizes the moment. His voice booms like a referee tossing gloves onto the ring, signaling the final round. Vice President Vance, Obama praised himself as a global leader. But in your view, did his foreign policy truly serve the interests of the American people? The question cuts like a blade, ripping open everything once called a legacy. The cameras pan quickly, capturing every tense expression. Vance doesn't need much time to strike back. He's been waiting for this moment all night. He stands tall, his gaze piercing through the veil of deception, his voice low but sharp like the whistle of wind before a storm. Mr. Hannity, Barack Obama's foreign policy was a cascade of disasters. He promised peace, but left a world in chaos, where enemies mocked us and allies turned away. I grew up in Ohio, where workers like my family believed in a strong America, leading the world with strength and honor. But Obama turned America into a weakling, groveling for forgiveness on the global stage. The stands quake, applause crashing like ocean waves. Vance holds up a chart, stage lights casting a blood-red glow over the curves. Face the facts. Under Obama, Russia annexed Crimea in 2014 while he sent bedsheets to Ukraine. Iran got $150 billion from the nuclear deal, using it to fund terrorism. China stole American technology, costing us $600 billion a year. Obama calls that leadership. I call it surrender. Obama responds, his voice straining for authority but trembling. My administration restored America's standing through smart diplomacy. The Iran deal prevented war, and we worked with China to address climate change. Leadership is building bridges, not walls. Vance doesn't let him go on. He leans forward, his voice a tempest sweeping away every lofty word. Building bridges? Obama? Who did you build bridges for? For Putin when you let him invade Ukraine without consequence? For Iran when you handed them billions to buy missiles? Or for China when you let them steal our technology and jobs? For 8 years you turned America into a bystander while our enemies grew stronger. That's not leadership. That's cowardice. Obama tries to counter, his voice rising with determination and a hint of desperation. We prevented war with Iran, stabilized the South China Sea, and led the world in climate agreements. That's real strength. Vance laughs, a dry, frigid sound like ice cracking in the dead of winter. Peace, Vance repeats, his eyes sharp as knives. Your peace was just an illusion floating on paper. He doesn't need to hammer the point. He only lists. When Russia took Crimea, you went on TV. When Iran tested ballistic missiles, you sent a letter of concern. When China illegally built islands in the South China Sea, you held a press conference. And while you spoke about climate, China boosted exports to America by 30%, drowning our manufacturing. Vance steps forward, his voice hard as tempered steel. I've met workers in Ohio. People who once had jobs, once had hope, now left with nothing because of cheap Chinese goods. They don't need a climate accord. They need a president who dares to protect them. He holds up a photo. A young American soldier standing on a Ukrainian battlefield, eyes fixed ahead, alone amid smoke and fire. This is Jake, a Marine from Cincinnati. He fought in Ukraine, where they lacked weapons because the Obama administration refused to send Javelin missiles. Under you, Ukraine lost Crimea and Jake lost comrades. I've met his family and seen the pain in their eyes. Have you ever met them, Obama? Or did you just sign deals with enemies and call it peace? The room falls silent. Then applause erupts, like thunder. Obama speaks, his voice subdued. We chose support through humanitarian aid and diplomacy. Not every problem needs a military solution. Vance cuts in, his voice sharp as a drawn blade. Humanitarian aid? While Putin sent tanks, you sent bed sheets. You call that support? We, Trump and I, sent javelins, sent a message, sent strength. He lifts his head, staring directly into the camera. We slapped tariffs on China, bringing back over 200,000 jobs. We don't write memoirs. We act. You failed on the world stage. We're fixing it. Sean Hannity jumps in, eyes gleaming. Vice President, you say you and Trump are leading the world. How? Vance turns to the audience, his eyes ablaze. We put America first. We built the strongest military on Earth, boosting defense spending by 20%. We made China pay, protecting American technology and jobs, and we brought peace to Ukraine, not with speeches, with resolve. That's leadership. Strong, clear, uncompromising. Obama's voice wavers. Strength isn't just military. Diplomacy helped us avoid war and build alliances. Vance retorts, his voice like a verdict. Alliances? You made allies. Turn away when you let Russia and China run rampant. You avoided war by begging for peace. Trump and I stand tall, defend American interests, and the world respects us for it. The crowd leaps to its feet, cheers crashing like a tsunami. Vance concludes, his voice an ironclad vow. Obama, your foreign policy was an America on its knees, alliances disillusioned, enemies gloating. Trump and I are rebuilding an America that leads the world, where honor and strength pave the way. You failed, and we are the new light. The room explodes. The MAGA crowd surges, clapping furiously, their chants thundering like a storm sweeping the stage into a whirlwind of fervor. Under the glare of camera lights, Barack Obama, once a towering figure, now resembles a stranded ship. His eyes adrift, hands trembling slightly as he adjusts his mic, and Sean Hannity, with a smile like a ringmaster, pauses the debate to engage the audience. But the stage already belongs to Vance. Hannity, like a man holding the reins of a fight spiraling beyond control, steps forward, his voice brimming with excitement yet tinged with subtle mockery. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we haven't just witnessed a debate, but a clash of two Americas, a past one celebrated and a future rising. Before he closes, he invites each guest to offer a final word to the American people. Obama takes a deep breath, his voice low, striving for calm. We are strong not just because of military might, but because of our ability to cooperate and lead with values. I believe America is greatest when it doesn't fear listening, when it doesn't turn. It's back on the world. History will judge. Vance doesn't need a moment to breathe. He steps forward, half a step, staring straight into the camera as if speaking to every family in Iowa, Michigan, Texas. America doesn't apologize for its strength. We don't retreat, we don't bow, and we don't let enemies dictate our destiny. The people are tired of empty promises cloaked in flowery words. Obama speaks of cooperation and values, but Vance strikes back, declaring it's time for America to lead the world again. Cheers erupt as the camera zooms in on Obama's face, a mix of melancholy and bitterness creeping in. He knows the game has shifted from reason to emotion, power, and who can make the louder echo. And tonight, Vance has won that battle. As the stage lights dim and the closing theme plays, the audience doesn't leave like after a typical debate, but like after a battle. Social media lights up with thousands of posts, clips of Vance dismantling Obama's legacy on immigration, the economy, culture, and foreign policy flooding timelines. One user writes, Vance is tearing Obama's legacy apart like a lion. A clip of Vance holding up the photo of Soldier Jake and challenging Obama skyrockets to 1 million views in minutes. Fox News and Breitbart blast breaking headlines, Vance, crushes Obama in the debate of the century. Meanwhile, liberal outlets like CNN and the New York Times defend Obama, but their criticisms of Vance's aggression are quickly overshadowed by the MAGA wave online. By dawn, as the city still sleeps, America is gripped by a new fever, a fever named Vance. Across social platforms, millions are sharing, commenting, and arguing about the debate's outcome. The fiery showdown from the night before has transformed into more than just a debate between two individuals. It's a clash of two visions, two essences, two Americas. Conservatives hail Vance as a populist hero, fearless in speaking raw truth, while progressives scramble to defend Obama's image, though even they no longer believe in the power of words as they once did. That afternoon, the White House releases a brief statement, carefully avoiding direct mention of Vance, asserting that America's foreign policy is shaped by global responsibility, not by threats or boasts of strength. The statement is quickly picked up by liberal media, but its impact is overshadowed by viral video clips sweeping social media, where Vance stands resolute, his voice unwavering, eyes unyielding. Within days, he's everywhere. On every newspaper, every TV channel, every conservative podcast, not as a potential candidate, but as the new leader of the movement. In Ohio, his home state, thousands flock to local Republican headquarters demanding more speeches, more rallies. Major donors, once cautious about his extreme stance, now line up for meetings, not to control him, but to keep up. GOP strategists begin rewriting their entire messaging platform, drawing inspiration from Vance's unyielding tone and vision. Vance's ironclad, unapologetic rhetoric, no backing down, no retreat, no apology, resonates deeply across the nation. In universities, political science professors struggle with a wave of young conservative students questioning the pragmatism of Obama's ideals. Many now view Vance as a new Reagan, someone who unabashedly declares America number one. From bars and churches to gyms across Texas and Pennsylvania, people aren't just discussing policy, they're talking about grit. They don't say Vance is right, they say Vance dares to speak. A week later, an op-ed in The Atlantic titled "Politics is a Battlefield, Not a Forum" poses a troubling question. If the winner is the one who gets the audience to stand, cheer, and share videos endlessly, has American politics shifted from a space for reflection to an arena of pure instinct? But the piece is quickly drowned out by an avalanche of comments, both supportive and critical, sharing clips from the debate, like new manifestos. Meanwhile, Barack Obama retreats into silence. No press conferences, no rebuttals, only a quiet photo from the Obama Foundation where his gaze is fixed on a glass window, looking out at a city that feels like a world slipping beyond his grasp. Within the Democratic Party, seasoned strategists argue over how to respond. They counter Vance with traditional arguments or quietly accept that the stage has shifted. But J.D. Vance doesn't wait for a response. 2 weeks later, he kicks off the Rebuild America tour, a series of live talks across swing states where he continues his rallying cry, "We don't need politicians, we need warriors." Venues fill to capacity, with some forced to set up outdoor screens to accommodate the thousands waiting to hear him speak. He steps onto the stage not as a polished statesman, but as a true American figure. Sleeves rolled up, eyes unflinching, his words like cannon fire. That night, in a speech in Des Moines, he closes with, "I'm not running to be president. I'm running to restore the will of a nation shamed by those who once represented it." The crowd erupts in cheers, and somewhere in the glow of a new storm, America shifts. Not because it was forced, but because it wanted to believe in something fierce, clear, and unapologetic. And then, like a silent yet unstoppable tide, the Vance movement spills into the core of the establishment. Within 3 months of the debate, many Republican politicians begin openly adjusting their rhetoric to mirror his. Their stances shift. Senators, who once hesitated on hardline foreign policy, now fully support an increased military budget and new trade tariffs on China and Mexico. Resolutions once seen as too extreme suddenly gain majority votes. On the Democratic side, a quiet wave of withdrawals unfolds as no one wants to be the next to be publicly torn apart on live TV. Vance's story becomes America's story, a nation that once embraced kindness and tempered wisdom, now weary of promises and compromises, craving an awakening. However rough, however fractured, Vance didn't create that anger. He just knew how to name it, give it shape, give it a voice. Those who were once silent, sidelined from the discourse, now feel seen again in history. When someone achieves that, they're no longer just a politician, they become an icon. Vance has changed how Americans see themselves, not as a nation apologizing for its past, nor as citizens forced to suppress their strength and beliefs, but as a community ready to defend what it believes is right, even if it makes the rest of the world tremble. He has made politics instinctive, relatable, yet dangerous. To his supporters, he is the light shattering the darkness of pretense and weakness. To his critics, he is the leader of a storm that threatens the very foundations of democracy. But that is the paradox of this era, where truth is overshadowed by spectacle. Ideals are replaced by sharp manifestos, and the winner is not the one who is right, but the one who makes the crowd feel they are. Vance stepped onto the stage as an underdog and emerged as a force to be reckoned with. America's stage wasn't just a place for roles to be played, but for scripts to be rewritten. As the curtain falls and the applause fades, people will remember that night not as a mere debate, but as the moment a new era began, with Vance at its helm, leaving the mistakes of the past behind. Gloves off. J.D. Vance deals Obama major humiliation reflects a divided America where values, beliefs, and political legacies clash intensely, especially in a hypothetical debate between J.D. Vance and Barack Obama. In today's United States, marked by deep political divisions, the story vividly highlights how Vance connects with the working class using personal stories and hard data, sharply criticizing Obama's stance on immigration, the economy, culture, and foreign policy. Vance's commanding presence in the debate, amplified by the passionate MAGA crowd and the viral wave on social media, mirrors the growing influence of conservative communities and the power of social media in American politics today. In contrast, Obama's faltering shows the struggle veteran politicians face when confronted by figures like Vance, who effectively channel public discontent with the elite. The lesson from this story is clear. Americans can learn how to engage in meaningful dialogue in a polarized society. Vance doesn't win just through sharp arguments. He succeeds by connecting with people's frustrations and offering a voice to the disillusioned. By telling personal stories like Maria losing her son to an immigrant criminal or Joe losing his job to a factory closure, Vance connects with the audience on an emotional level. In real life, when discussing contentious issues like immigration or the economy, we should combine hard facts, like Vance's figures on a 40% drop in deportations and $20 trillion in debt, with personal stories, to build empathy rather than just debating theory. Obama's failure highlights that relying solely on eloquent speeches or past prestige isn't enough. Leaders must address real concerns, like Sarah's fear of cultural division or Jake's insecurity in Ukraine. In our communities, we should avoid labels like privileged or oppressed, which Vance criticized, and instead focus on dialogue based on shared values, like work and security. The social media surge in the story shows how platforms can amplify voices but also widen divides. Americans should use these platforms to share positive stories, like how Vance inspires the working class, rather than resorting to personal attacks. By learning from Vance's victory, connecting emotionally using facts and focusing on solutions, we can bridge divides and build a more united community in America's challenging political landscape. Subscribe to the channel for sharp analyses of America's future, where Vance and MAGA are shaping the narrative. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video with even hotter stories.